Stellar 1, we have an unidentified vessel bearing 57 degrees, Mark 4.
Star 1, this is Control. Analysis? For as long as conflict has existed, the battlefield has always evolved. From land to sea to air. Each new domain reshaped how wars are fought and how nations are defended. Today, the battlefield extends beyond Earth itself. Our way of life on the ground depends on our strength above it. From navigation to global commerce, the joint force depends on space-enabled capabilities. In a contested and congested environment, protecting the high ground is no longer a choice. It is a necessity. To defend our nation, we must be agile. We must build a resilient framework of mobility, one that ensures freedom of action, that no asset is left isolated, and no threat goes unanswered. This is the mission you have accepted. You are the architects of the most complex warfighting domain humanity has ever known. The work you do this week shapes how the nation fights and wins in space. Welcome to the Space Mobility Conference and Expo. Defining the space logistics enterprise starts now.
Please welcome Spacecom Executive Director, Ryan Brown.
Good morning, and welcome to the 2026 Space Mobility Conference and Expo. I got to tell you, before we get going here, we had like the best conference plans coming into this event. We call it run of show. It was like maybe the best run of show of all time, of all conferences. Sometimes the universe has other plans, though, and you got to change things at 1 a.m. the night before your conference starts because a certain general is stuck in D.C. trying to get to Orlando after one of the biggest snowstorms in recent memory. So I'm going to talk about just a couple of changes that we're going to run through the day today, ask for your forgiveness, and then we'll get into it. So General Purdy was stuck in D.C. last night. He's trying to get down to Orlando here today. He was going to be our opening keynote speaker this morning. So we are going to move him to the end of the day. He's going to close the conference. So immediately following a special presentation this morning, General Whiting will open our conference as our opening keynote speaker. We will have a short break after General Whiting talks. Then our wargaming panel will come on the stage after that short break at about 10:20. Then we've got our left of launch panel will come up after that. Then we get you guys to lunch. Then we're pretty much back on time. General Purdy closes the event. We get to go party in the exhibit hall and have a bunch of drinks and forget this whole thing happened this way. So if you hear any maniacal screaming or laughter backstage, that's not us running around trying to figure this out. That's Mother Nature laughing at her sick joke this week. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge an event that continues to shape how we think about risk, responsibility, and leadership in space. Today, January 28th, marks the 40th anniversary of the loss of Space Shuttle Challenger. For many in this room, the shuttle program wasn't just history, it was personal. It shaped careers, families, and a generation of space professionals. Challenger reminds us that space is unforgiving, that progress carries risk, and that responsibility must always match ambition. I'd like to ask you to join me just for a brief moment in reflecting on the crew of Challenger and the legacy they left behind. Thank you. It's truly great to see leaders from across the U.S. Space Force, U.S. Space Command, industry, civil government, international partners, and the investment community gathered here today. The people in this room reflect the reality that advantage is gained not by a single mission area, but by a logistics enterprise that enables deployment, maneuver, reinforcement, and resilience across the full scope of space operations. Across our U.S. military, Joint Logistics Doctrine exists for a simple reason. Enduring advantage depends not just on deploying forces, but on the ability to sustain, maneuver, and reinforce and adapt them over time. Today, the Space Force can deploy capability to orbit, which they do extraordinarily well. But once systems are on the battlefield, the range of logistics options are limited. Limited ability to move, limited ability to reinforce, limited ability to recover when systems are degraded or lost. That's not a criticism, it's the reality of a young service operating in a domain where the threat, the physics, and timelines are unlike any other. Maintaining freedom of action in space will depend on whether the Space Force can begin, over time, to build a true space logistics enterprise. Like every other domain, it must enable sustained operations, freedom of maneuver, and resilience in conflict. But unlike every other domain, it must be purpose-built for a domain where the distance, orbital mechanics, and energy fundamentally change how capability is delivered and sustained. That challenge, how to deliver familiar operational effects in a domain where logistics options are limited, is exactly what today's conference is designed to address. We'll ground the day in the threat and operational reality. We'll examine the ground logistics layer that enables access and operational tempo. We'll explore maneuver as a warfighting capability and the logistics and infrastructure required to make it executable. We'll discuss reinforcement and reconstitution as essential means of sustaining combat power and resilience in orbit. And we'll close by looking at how wargaming and doctrine development turn concepts into operational plans. This conference is not about solving every logistics challenge in one day, but it is about defining the enterprise, aligning the warfighter, the acquirer, and industry, and identifying what happens next. Before I hand over the stage, I want to thank our ballroom sponsor, Amentum. Amentum's support reflects a deep commitment to national security missions and to the people who execute them, and we're grateful for their partnership in making today's conversations possible. As we open the conference, it's also important to remember that behind every capability, every mission, and every advancement in space are the people, and in some cases, their profound sacrifice. To help us embrace that perspective, we'll now have a special award presentation from the Astronauts Memorial Foundation for the 2026 Spirit of Space Award. The Spirit of Space Award recognizes a leader whose career has fundamentally strengthened the nation and the world's ability to reach, operate in, and depend on space, not just through technical achievement, but through institution building, stewardship, and long-term vision. The Astronauts Memorial Foundation honors and memorializes those astronauts who have sacrificed their lives for the advancement of human spaceflight and inspires future generations of explorers, ensuring their legacy. In that spirit, this award recognizes leaders who have carried that responsibility forward, building the structures, policies, partnerships, and capabilities that make modern spaceflight possible and protecting its future. As Commercial Space Weeks brings together defense, civil, and commercial leaders shaping the next era of space, this award celebrates the bridge builders, those whose careers span government, industry, and national service, and whose work ensures that exploration, commerce, and security in space remain possible, trusted, and sustainable. This is not an award for a single mission or moment, but for a body of work that has strengthened the foundation upon which all space activity rests. Here to introduce the recipient and present the 2026 Spirit of Space Award, representing the Astronauts Memorial Foundation, is their president, Thad Altman.
Thank you, Ryan. Presented by the Astronaut Memorial Foundation during Commercial Space Week, this award honors individuals who have worked to ensure that access to space is safe, resilient, and enduring, so the human commercial activity in space can continue to grow for generations. This is made possible by new ideas, new growth, new leadership, but most importantly, by courage, the courage to step out and innovate. And when we look at what's happening at the Space Coast here in Florida and across the country with the burgeoning of our space industry, it's almost incomprehensible and unbelievable the steps that we've made. And it has taken this innovation and courage to make this happen. Lieutenant General Nina Armagno is just that individual. And a little bit about this physical award that represents General Armagno. The award itself has been crafted to resemble the 4 pillars of creation as seen through the James Webb Telescope. The pillars are towering interstellar columns located in the Eagle Nebula, about 7,000 light years away from Earth. They are a stellar nursery, actively enabling the formation of new stars. I can think of no other example of what these individuals are doing. They are stars, enabling a new generation of spaceflight and exploration. The Spirit of Space Award recognizes the leader whose career has fundamentally strengthened our nation's space program. General Armagno embodies the spirit of this award.
Today, the world depends on space for everything from national security to banking to the phones in our pockets. Access to space should never be taken for granted. Behind every launch, every signal, and every safe return, there are leaders who build the systems, shape the culture, and carry the responsibility for keeping that access alive. Lieutenant General Nina Armagno is one of those leaders. Her story began with a childhood dream to become an astronaut. That dream led her to the United States Air Force Academy and then onto a 35-year career in national security space. Nina Armagno was not simply following a path, she was helping create it. When the United States Space Force became a reality, Nina Armagno became the first female general officer as the Director of Staff. And she is the only officer to have ever commanded both Air Force space wings at Vandenberg and Cape Canaveral. General Armagno would help shape how this new service would think, how it would operate, and how it would serve the nation and its allies in the space domain and the realm of global security, commerce, and daily life. As the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, she championed space capabilities that were not just advanced, but reliable, resilient, and responsibly governed. Under her leadership, space wasn't only about what we could do, it was about how well, how safely, and how sustainably we could deliver satellites to orbit and humanity to the stars. Today, General Armagno continues her mission of bridging the worlds of government and industry, serving on the boards and advisory groups of leading commercial companies like Rocket Lab and First Command, shaping a safe, secure, and sustainable space environment and economy that benefits us all. In the end, Nina Armagno's legacy can be captured in a single idea: making access to space possible not just once, but always. The Astronauts Memorial Foundation is proud to recognize and present Lieutenant General Nina Armagno with the 2026 Spirit of Space Award.
Ladies and gentlemen, to present the Spirit of Space Award, please welcome to the stage General Stephen Whiting, Commander of the U.S. Space Command. Ladies and gentlemen, please.
May I have your attention, please? We are aware of the building alarm, and we have confirmed that the evacuation is not necessary at this time. If an evacuation is required, direction will be provided. May I have your attention, please? We are aware of the building alarm, and we have confirmed that the evacuation is not necessary at this time. If an evacuation is required, direction
yeah.
will be provided. May I have your attention, please? We are aware of the building alarm, and we have confirmed that the evacuation is not necessary at this time. If an evacuation is required, direction will be provided. Please remain seated. And feel free to use this time as a networking opportunity until we resume the presentation.
What'd I tell you? It was going to be an interesting day. Not an emergency, but a small issue outside the building did trigger that alarm. It has actually been going off all week on its own. So we were prepared with that overhead comment to let everybody know it's okay and nobody needs to get up. Apologies for the slight delay there. We appreciate everybody's patience and sense of humor. And we're going to get things going right back into it. I'm going to welcome Mr. Alderman back to the stage. General Whiting, sir, please come back on up. Let's get right back into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and welcome to the podium our 2026 Spirit of Space awardee, Lieutenant General Nina Amano. You want to give her the...
Oh my gosh, thanks everybody. It kind of reminds me of my 2-star promotion where the moment the flag went in, was seated, there was thunder and lightning and I remember my family looking up at me like, wow. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, General Whiting, for the honor of actually presenting.
May I have your attention, please?
Here we go again.
Disregard any current audio or visual alarms. There is no emergency at this time. Corrective action.
Oh, there might be.
Taken to clear the alarms as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Su atención, por favor. Ninguna alarma o tiniebla visible. En estos momentos no hay ninguna emergencia. Acciones correctivas están siendo implementadas para apagar las alarmas lo más pronto posible. Gracias.
De nada. All right. Let me say how wonderful it is to be here and to accept this award. It is truly my honor. Thad Altman, thank you. You're the CEO of the Astronauts Memorial Foundation, and this is a foundation I deeply admire for all the work you do to honor the men and women who sacrificed it all, gave it all in the name of our nation, space exploration, and for future generations. And standing here today, the 40th anniversary of Challenger, it just makes your foundation even more important and exceptional. I'd like to thank you as well for your leadership, advocacy.
May I have your attention, please? Disregard any current audio or visual alarms. There is no emergency at this time. Corrective action is being taken to clear the alarms as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Su atención, por favor. No presten atención a ninguna alarma audible o visible. En estos momentos no hay ninguna emergencia. Acciones correctivas están siendo implementadas para apagar las alarmas lo más pronto posible. Gracias.
Thank you for your advocacy and honoring figures and change makers in the space community. Figures like General Susan Helms, who was the recipient of this award last year, and I'm incredibly humbled to follow in her footsteps. General Helms is someone who inspires me. She inspires us all, I know. She was a trailblazer, an engineer, an astronaut, a commander, a leader who understands the wonder of spaceflight and the systems, the importance of the systems that enable spaceflight. As my commander, I watched her handle a multitude of complexities with excellence and grace, and to be named in her company moves me profoundly. This award recognizes the importance of our nation's and the world's ability to reach, operate in, and depend on space. And I've been fortunate enough in my career to experience firsthand what it takes to provide those capabilities to warfighters and to the world. Perhaps more importantly, what it takes to protect, defend, and preserve those exquisite space capabilities that we all enjoy. As commander of the 30th Space Wing at Vandenberg and later the 45th, I led teams through adverse situations, technical failures, and seemingly impossible timelines to get rockets and the systems that those rockets carried into space and safely on orbit. Later in my career, I shepherded the National Security Space Launch Acquisition Strategy through our friends at the Pentagon, the White House, and in Congress in order to foster competition and innovation in our growing space economy. And of course, as the Director of Staff in the United States Space Force, I was privileged to be there at the very beginning, establishing policies and processes for our newest military branch of service. And now in my work with Rocket Lab and others in the commercial sector, I can already see the future of space accelerating and taking shape. A dynamic space economy where space capabilities aren't rare or fragile, but rather routine, affordable, and accessible to everyone. None of this happens by accident. It happens because we invest in more than just space missions. We invest in the infrastructure, the institutions, the workforce, and the partnerships and policies and technologies that create a robust space ecosystem. As a young girl, and I don't know how they put my face on that little girl's body, but as a young girl, I dreamed of becoming an astronaut. I really did. I saw us land on the moon, and I had a poster of Sally Ride on my bedroom wall. And while I didn't become an astronaut like Susan Helms did, I've devoted my career to ensuring that those who reach for the heavens are assured they can do so. Therefore, this award, the Spirit of Space, goes out to all the people working tirelessly behind the scenes at this very moment to make space possible, like those who launched GPS last night. Teams like Lockheed Martin, who built the satellite, SpaceX, who built the rocket, the Space Launch Delta 45 team, who ran launch operations, successfully launching the newest GPS-3, not only to supplement the constellation, but for the world. These people, and all of you, have the spirit of space running through your veins. So thank you for this incredible honor, and may we continue building a world that is worthy of those we remember and inspires future generations to come. Thank you very much. So beautiful.
Please welcome Vice President, Launch, Missiles, and Mobility at the Aerospace Corporation, Randy Kendall.
Good morning, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our opening keynote speaker this morning, General Stephen Whiting, the commander of U.S. Space Command, the 11th Unified Combatant Command. General Whiting is responsible for defending U.S. and allied interests in space domain, providing space effects to joint warfighters around the world, and protecting the joint force from space-enabled attacks. Within that responsibility, he leads over 16,000 soldiers, Marines, sailors, Coast Guardsmen, airmen, and guardians operating ground and space-based systems around the globe. Please join me in welcoming General Whiting.
All right, well, good morning, and let me thank Randy for that kind introduction, and I also want to extend my congratulations to Lieutenant General Armagno. Nina's been a friend, a dear friend, for 35 years and an incredible colleague in our time in the Air Force and the Space Force, and that award is very richly deserved, and so my congratulations to her. It is truly a pleasure to be here as our nation celebrates our 250th year, and as you can see, at U.S. Space Command, we're celebrating with a new logo, which highlights the heritage from the Minuteman of the Revolutionary War to the futuristic space systems our joint force operates today. You know, 250 years ago, the founders struggled to defeat the British and toiled in the complexities of what it would mean to become a new nation. And that complexity was baked in right from the very beginning of our nation as our founding fathers fought for independence from the British Crown, even as they declared that they were fighting for the rights that they believed were God-given to them, as they would have said, as Englishmen. And we continue to see those complexities today.
Distance will be measured in inches, feet, yard, and mile. So 12 inches to a foot?
12 feet to a yard.
If it were only so simple. 3 feet to a yard.
And how many yards to a mile?
Nobody knows.
Okay, so maybe we'll just stick to kilometers in the rest of the briefing today. You know, 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface is where U.S. Space Command's area of responsibility begins. And as a combatant command, we are required by Title 10 of U.S. federal law to plan for the employment of the armed forces, to take actions to deter conflict, and to command forces, if necessary, to fight and win in our theater of operations. Now, as our command headquarters is moving from Colorado Springs to Huntsville, Rocket City, Alabama, I've been thinking a lot about the significance of the mobility of our forces and how, in order to win, core warfighting tenets must be adhered to. Principles and functions like maneuver, movement, unity of command, and sustainment. Those which our nation's earliest military leaders successfully utilized to defeat the British. Those are still relevant today. Principles and functions we need to carry into space. So, what is maneuver warfare? For a definition, let's turn to Marine Corps Doctrinal Pub 1, also known as warfighting. That doctrine says, quote, maneuver warfare seeks to shatter the enemy's cohesion through a variety of rapid, focused, and unexpected actions which create a turbulent and rapidly deteriorating situation for which the enemy cannot cope. As we will discuss in a moment, this definition has been informed by the theories of John Boyd. In maneuver warfare, forces avoid the enemy's strengths and target their vulnerabilities, and maneuver in multiple dimensions, spatial, temporal, and psychological, to create dilemmas, paralyze decision-making, and collapse the enemy from within. As a joint function, we describe it as the coordinated movement and maneuvering of military forces to achieve positional advantage. From our nation's Continental Army of 1776 to the Joint Force of 2026, time and again, the maneuver enabled by sustainment has stood out as decisive, leading to victory in many battles and many conflicts. In the American Revolution, our Continental Army employed these functions much more effectively than the British. Americans favored dispersed mobile operations, light infantry and militia units that could strike, fade, and relocate quickly rather than fight long linear battles. And the support of our allies, with the French as our first, was also key to the American victory, providing instruction on military tactics, supply of key armaments, and then fighting with us in joint operations, both in Army and naval engagements. But history is full of examples of defeat when maneuver and sustainment were not properly considered. For example, the Maginot Line that France tried to utilize in World War II. The Germans employed combined arms, surprise, and the rapid force concentration of a new doctrinal concept, of course something we all know as blitzkrieg, to bypass those French defenses. They moved quickly and massed at the weak points. In space, we also need the ability for swift and sustained combat operations such that we can position ourselves for advantage and put the adversary in positions for which they cannot cope. Said plainly, we need maneuver warfare in space. Now, since World War II, the U.S. military, for the most part, has achieved and maintained unrivaled lethality. Now, what are some of the causes for that success? First, our nation's defense industrial base has had no peer for the past 85 years. Our commercial industry has consistently pumped out quality and quantity, pioneering better equipment at scale, as well as better technology, usually, but not always. At the beginning of World War II, both German and Japanese aircraft were generally considered to be technologically superior. And during Korea, the swept-wing MiG-15 was a better aircraft than the straight-wing fighters the U.S. fielded at the beginning of that conflict. But we had better training, and we had the ingenious American warrior. The intuition, the optimistic can-do spirit, and the innovation of the American people are asymmetric advantages for any conflict. The creativity, self-reliance, and community spirit of our populace, when properly employed, will guide our nation to victory through trust, initiative, and adaptability. And finally, building on decades of experience, one of our enduring advantages is our rich tradition of joint warfighting, often employing maneuver warfare across multiple domains and steeped in doctrinal concepts of warfare. If we're going to deep dive into the joint functions of maneuver and sustainment, you know I'm going to have to talk about these military theorists. And in fact, there's an old saying that says it's not really a military briefing until you've quoted a dead Prussian. But let's start with Sun Tzu, who wrote, quote, "There is nothing more difficult than tactical maneuvering." Now imagine what he would have written if he had considered tactical maneuvering in space, in which to catch up to a spacecraft ahead of you in the same orbit, you first must slow down. Or if you want to reach a higher orbit in which your speed will be slower, you first must speed up. Sun Tzu also wrote, "An army without its baggage, without its provisions, it is lost." Now, let's get to that deceased Prussian, Karl von Clausewitz, who in my estimation is the military theorist who has most influenced our modern conception of warfare. He wrote, "The end for which a soldier is recruited, clothed, armed, and trained, the whole objective of his sleeping, eating, drinking, and marching is simply that he should fight at the right place and at the right time." Said differently, we must have the logistics and sustainment necessary to enable fighting when and where we need to. Now, tying it all together is Colonel John Boyd with his famous OODA loop. He said, "Through the high tempo of operations, constantly shifting of forces and fluid, flexible action, the enemy will rapidly lose control, cohesion, and momentum. The friendly force must emphasize superior speed and tactical unity, including superior mobile units with essential logistics located forward." Now you can see how Boyd's theories influenced the Marine Corps definition of maneuver warfare that I mentioned earlier. With these historic military figures putting such emphasis on maneuver and sustainment, it's no wonder that they make up 2 of our 7 joint warfighting functions. So let's take a look at a more modern illustration of these functions effectively employed. One example of that would be Operation Desert Storm, maneuver warfare at its finest, and its oft-mentioned left hook and air war. But Desert Storm did not just happen. It was the culmination of 15 years of work, instituting the lessons of Vietnam, applying the air-land battle doctrine that had been developed in the 1970s, leveraging the equipment procured in the 1980s to execute that doctrine, and it was all sustained by a robust and professional logistics force, deriving the benefits of joint warfighting as laid out in the Goldwater-Nichols Act, and then with constant training, exercises, and rehearsals in places like the National Training Center, Red Flag, Fallon, and 29 Palms. And it worked spectacularly. Any force that seeks to be successful in maneuver warfare has some basic requirements. They need maneuver-focused doctrine and tactics, techniques, and procedures for their domain and integrated jointly. They need sensors, C2 systems, platforms, and effectors that can enable the needed agility and speed. They need to exercise to test, refine, and rehearse their TTPs and develop the most important component of maneuver warfare, our warriors. And those warriors need decentralized mission command, or else the tactical level will have to wait for the orders from the higher level before taking action, and those higher levels will act without the unique visibility of the tactical level. They need to emphasize surprise, unpredictability, and deception in their plans and operations. And they also need the enabling capabilities, such as mobility, logistics, and sustainment infrastructure to keep things moving. Sorry, the slides are having a hard time advancing here. Okay, while we wait for that, let's think about the terrestrial services in the Joint Force, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps. They do not just have maneuver warfare because they want it. They have it because they have invested over decades into sizable force structure that enable them to execute those kind of operations. We even have an entire U.S. Combatant Command, U.S. Transportation Command, that is focused on this idea of mobility and maneuver. And so I think it's worth pausing and considering the enormous investment of these forces that they have to enable maneuver warfare. For example, the U.S. Navy. It needs deep water ports around the globe for replenishment and repair options. It has nuclear reactors for unrefueled longevity of operations. I'm not a sailor, but think about the infrastructure that goes into provisioning and sustaining those nuclear reactors. And they require at-sea and underway replenishment for their ships and submarines. According to Admiral Nimitz, this capability was the key factor for the U.S. Navy winning in World War II in the Pacific. In fact, of the U.S. Navy's nearly 300-strong fleet of ships, about 30 are dedicated to logistics and supply, with Military Sealift Command adding another 80 or so ships to the sustainment function. Now, for the Air Force's maneuver and sustainment, it needs aerial refueling capability, so much so that about 14% of its aircraft inventory is dedicated to aerial refueling. That's something around 500 KC-135s and KC-46s. Now, think about how many wings of airmen that is to ensure U.S. military aircraft can maneuver around the globe as needed for mission success. To ensure rapid deployment and sustainment of forces in case of conflict, the U.S. Army and U.S. Marine Corps maintain a global distribution of prepositioned stocks across the U.S. and abroad. These prepost stocks, kept ashore and afloat, include a wide range of material, everything from combat vehicles, including M1 tanks, to M2 Bradley fighting vehicles, to sustainment supplies, such as ammunition, fuel, medical equipment, food, and water, to keep soldiers and Marines ready and able to fight for weeks and months. Space forces as well have maneuver and sustainment needs, including spaceports, boosters, refuelers, servicers, maneuvering space vehicles to hunt and evade, and ready stocks of servicing and replacement satellites that can be rapidly launched. Over time, I predict the force structure dedicated to supporting the maneuver and sustainment needs of the Space Forces will have to rival in size and scope, relative to the number of space systems we have, that of the other domains. And we aren't the only country that understands the need for maneuver-enabling space capabilities. Our opponents realize this need to maneuver and be sustained in space. China's buildup of space capabilities in quantity and diversity is nothing short of jaw-dropping. From damaging lasers to jamming against comms, radar, and navigation, to the fielding of anti-satellite weapons able to reach GEO at 36,000 kilometers. The Chinese Communist Party's advancements threaten our advantage in space. Similarly concerning is Russia's reported intention of fielding a nuclear weapon on orbit, as a nuclear detonation in outer space would cause devastating consequences for the United States, the world, and the global economy. China's developing on-orbit servicing as witnessed by their recent SJ-21 and SJ-25 docking and potential refueling demonstration. They launched their inspect and repair system stating its intended use. And we have witnessed them conducting maintenance operations and refueling of their space station. And they're increasing the launch of undeniable dual-use capabilities. This concerns me, as these capabilities, in concert, reveal a push to develop a systemic on-orbit refueling and logistics capability, which, if effective, as intended, has the possibility to degrade our current space superiority. Dogfighting in space takes fuel. And if the Chinese are refueling their effectors, what happens when we run out of maneuver in a fight? What happens when one dog is chained to a spot and the other can move? What dog do you want to be? And what happens when one of our key legacy systems, what we call our high-value assets like SATCOM, GPS, or missile warning, perhaps launched with only enough fuel to execute station keeping over its lifetime? What happens when it's approached by a refuelable dogfighter? Who has the advantage? We cannot allow our competitors to have superior maneuver capabilities in space any more than we would allow it on the land, at sea, or in the air. It is our collective responsibility to ensure we maintain our superiority. One unique American advantage over our competitors is our integration with our allied and commercial teammates. As mentioned earlier, during the Revolution, America did not fight alone. Financial and military support from France, Spain, and Native American nations aided our fight for independence. Our coalition has evolved over the past 250 years with many robust alliances to this day, including in space, where one of our command's greatest strengths lies with Operation Multinational Force Operation Olympic Defender, our 7-nation-strong integrated space operational team. And U.S. Space Command is exercising maneuver warfare with members of this coalition. In 2025, we executed bilateral rendezvous and proximity operations, or RPOs as we call them, with France and the UK, building on our first combined military space maneuvers in 2024. It's a testament to the success of MNF OOD. Allied space forces understand the need to maneuver, but we are limited in performing these exercises due to resource constraints. U.S. Space Command also integrates well with all of our commercial partners, some of whom have demonstrated on-orbit capabilities like RPOs. We look forward to participation by some of these companies and others in our first ever commercially integrated classified tabletop exercise. Starting in March, we're going to host 4 of these quarterly TTXs with select commercial partners. And the first exercise will focus on the threat of weapons of mass destruction in space. Now, another space maneuver-related success is our national and commercial launch capabilities. Our ability to quickly and overwhelmingly redeploy and reconstitute our on-orbit assets reliably in a contested environment is a national strategic advantage and outpaces all of our competitors. This advantage is one we should continue to grow and leverage, but one we should not allow to become a single point of failure. And while getting to space is crucial, we also need capabilities to sustain our assets once they are on orbit. The biggest challenge for us to improve our maneuver and sustainment in space is the tyranny of distance. The Pacific Ocean is about 4.5 times the width of the US. The distance to geostationary orbit, 8 times the US width. Distance to the moon, where the next key terrain lies, 85 United States. Or to put it another way, approximately the combined diameter of all the planets in our solar system, all 8 of them, can fit between the Earth and Moon. And back in my day, we could have even squeezed in a 9th planet, so long live Pluto. Okay, one more interesting stat. The volume of space between low Earth orbit and geosynchronous orbit is 312 trillion cubic kilometers. How many cubic miles is that? Nobody knows, as General Nate Bargatze would say. Attempting to sustain our forces in this vast space without on-orbit servicing is like sending an aircraft carrier strike group across the Pacific with only the fuel in their tanks and no way to refuel, rearm, or repair. In World War II, our Navy chose underway sustainment and the ability to refuel, rearm, and repair ships anywhere in the ocean. Japan chose rear sustainment, and we know how that turned out. For space, Earth is the rear, far from the theater of operations, particularly in geo and cislunar orbits. Said differently, terrestrial-based sustainment creates the longest supply chains in the history of warfare, in some cases by orders of magnitude. But if we are to effectively warfight and war win in space, as required by law, we must enable space maneuver with our version of underway sustainment. Now, to meet this challenge, we have many needs. We're going to need proliferation of some of our constellations, most evidently low Earth orbit communications and ISR. Like terrestrial domains, we also need platforms with thrust and enduring delta V, particularly for inspector satellites and high-value assets. We need fast, repeatable, resilient, cyber-hardened access to space through both launch and the satellite control network. We need to improve our readiness through joint and combined exercising. Like fighter pilot training sorties, space warfighters must consistently train to test and extend the maneuver envelope. And our domain is ideal for high-fidelity modeling and simulation trainers. We need TTP development and unit training on those TTPs for iterative practice without regret to the effectiveness of the systems. And all of this builds readiness. It builds confidence. It builds a war-fighting culture ready to execute mission command. When, however, we are constrained to operate only with the fuel we launch with, it causes a psychology of scarcity in the mind of the mission planners and decision makers, and it truly permeates our entire enterprise. The resulting and very real risk of consuming fuel and mission capacity and life of the satellite with no ability to replenish centralizes decisions to maneuver and operate, and therefore it just virtually removes maneuver from the tactical commander's decision space and moves us away from mission command. But if we can decentralize execution, it enables campaigning and warfighting in space. And this demonstrates peace through strength. And all of this requires on-orbit resupply, logistics, and sustainment. And just like every other domain, we need a committed force focused on logistics. So let's look back at a time when our nation's military faced a similar emerging problem, but in a different domain. In 1941, General George Marshall and the U.S. Army, recognizing the changing character of war and the increasing possibility that the U.S. would enter the war in Europe, initiated a massive armored exercise with thousands of vehicles and hundreds of thousands of soldiers across muddy acres of Louisiana and Texas. These maneuvers were designed to test new tactics and new technologies. The blue team was led by Major General Patton, a two-star at the time, and Dwight Eisenhower, only a colonel, led the red team. All of this was done before Pearl Harbor, before the U.S. was at war, but as a preparation in case war was to come. During the maneuvers, one of Patton's more famous moments came when the tanks, moving at full speed on the attack, ran out of fuel. There were no supply trucks to be found. He had outrun them, and Patton wasn't about to sit around waiting for logistics to catch up. So what did he do? Patton drove his tanks straight to a public gas station. Imagine it, a tank commanded by George Patton, engine rumbling, pulling up to a little gas station in rural Texas. Now, Patton's gas station stop highlighted an immediate need for fuel, but the maneuvers exposed deeper systemic operational and logistical deficiencies. The older tanks were slow and undergunned. Communication was spotty. Supply lines failed. Combined arms effects with the Air Corps were minimal. Now, as a result of that exercise, the Army developed a new technology, a superior medium tank, the M4 Sherman. They created a faster, more agile supply chain, including fuel distribution. and they established dedicated tactical air units and specialized air-ground liaison teams. And the Army promoted the leaders, Patton, Eisenhower, Bradley, and others that adapted to the new realities that that exercise illuminated. So, should we conduct our own Louisiana maneuvers? What would a Louisiana maneuvers exercise look like in a space warfighting context? Applying the years of research and development and analysis done within the Space Force, FFRDCs, commercial sector, and academia, what if we exercised our satellite maneuver warfare concepts and capabilities at an unprecedented scale, simultaneously moving satellites while also reconstituting those attrited through responsive launch? We could also maneuver our SATCOM, PNT, and telemetry tracking and commanding services in the electromagnetic spectrum. We need to look at what our supply chain limitations are and how to overcome them, and how the red team adversary matches up, where our technologies fall short, and how our TTPs could evolve. We know we'll have to do all of these things throughout all levels of conflict in a real fight. This exercise would show us if we are slow and undergunned and how our support to the joint force is affected. Now, to be fair, we do individual elements of this exercising in some of the different venues that are highlighted on this chart. And recently, we held a senior level tabletop exercise at U.S. Space Command called Zoom Racer for sustained maneuvering and refueling. This TTX gave us insight into the required training, massing of forces, maneuver in support of campaigning, obfuscation, and so much more. But we haven't exercised holistically in this way. And one of the reasons is that we need better sustainment and logistics capabilities to enable this type of large-scale exercise and to refuel and replenish ourselves at the end of such an exercise. Rather than the Louisiana maneuvers, perhaps we should call them the Apollo maneuvers. But whatever we call them, these maneuvers must be done before conflict, because if we wait until crisis, we won't have the time or capacity to exercise. If we get this right, we will gain the ability to pivot from static attrition warfare to maneuver warfare. With better logistics comes better available posture, increased forces and footprints. With reusable, refuelable capabilities, we empower lower-level tactical decision makers. We improve mission command. With increased maneuverability, our predictability decreases and our ability to position ourselves for advantage increases. Maneuver warfare in space, much like its terrestrial counterpart, is not just about maneuvering assets. It's about manipulating the adversary's perception and decision-making cycles. But if we don't get this right, we will lose our advantage to sustain operations in protracted conflict in space. We will reduce our ability to execute mission command for space functions. Our joint force will be at risk. Our mission is to close long-range kill chains to affect satellites, missiles, aircraft, ships, tanks, and bunkers, and to interdict our adversary's space-enabled kill chains. This will not happen if we put static or tethered, meaning one fuel tank of maneuver per satellite, forces against maneuvering forces, refuelable forces. If we don't get this right, our mission will be at risk. History is full of examples of where movement beats fixed, even fortified and fixed. If we cannot sustain presence and maneuver for advantage, the lead we have in space will be fleeting. Space is inherently expeditionary. Our operations and activities unfold in a remote and unforgiving environment, sometimes tens of thousands of miles away from any sort of terrestrial garrison or support infrastructure. The immense distance creates profound logistical hurdles, demanding unparalleled foresight and self-sufficiency. As the space domain becomes more congested and contested, the ability to maintain advantage through maneuver and sustainment is only going to grow in imperative. We cannot afford a static posture. The capacity to reposition assets, replenish resources, and repair systems on orbit allow us to dictate the operational tempo and outlast any adversary. Victory in space will not be won by those with the most assets, but by those who are fastest, more agile, and can sustain through a protracted fight. Success will belong to the side that can dynamically respond to threats and maintain operational endurance long after the first strike. The choices we make in the next few years will decide whether space sustainment becomes a vulnerability or our most significant advantage. Next month, NASA's Artemis program will take astronauts for a trip around the moon in preparation to return Americans to the lunar surface and continuing to forge a path for a permanent base. We are on the cusp of a new frontier with deep space exploration to Mars and beyond. This future beyond Earth, however, will only be realized if we commit to securing and safeguarding it. The challenge is immense, yet we have faced such odds before. 250 years ago, out of necessity, our nation's fledgling Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, supported by key allies, defeated a stronger, larger, better equipped foe by effectively employing maneuver warfare enabled by critical sustainment. And they changed the world by bringing forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men and women are created equal. They even laid the foundation that our first foe, the United Kingdom, now is one of our closest allies, including in space. To win in a contested space theater of operations today, we must draw upon this same legacy of ingenuity and logistical mastery to protect that amazing future which is coming. So I want to thank the Space Mobility Conference for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to engaging with some of you throughout the morning, and thank you very much.
Please welcome back Ryan Brown.
Thank you, General Whiting. What a great way to frame why maneuver and sustainment actually matter to the warfighter in space. And it really sets up the conversations we'll be having throughout the rest of the day. We originally had a 30-minute break scheduled here. Because of the alarm, we're a little behind schedule, so we're going to shorten this break a little bit. We're going to start the next panel at 11:25. I'm sorry, 10:25, not 11, 10:25. So that gives about 15 to 20 minutes. So we have coffee outside. Please make your way outside of the room, take a break, exchange your business cards. We'll see you back here at 10:25.